good. We're good to go. Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to this talk. So I am Sebastian, the co-founder of BeastieJob. I'll tell you in a few words what we are doing, very short. What we are doing is actually an amazing service where freelancers find relevant jobs and recruiters find the profiles they really need. And we are doing all this without taking any cut. So that means it's less expensive for recruiters and it is fair for freelancers in tech. So it's cool. So if you just want to know more, go to beastiejob.com. And that's it for the advertisement. Now, today, we are very, very pleased to welcome Cassidy Williams. Hello, Cassidy.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
And you're going to talk about us, about NextJS, about NextJS, definitely. Look, I leave it to you to introduce yourself and you start whenever you're ready.
Sure. Yes. So, hello, I'm Cassidy. I'm actually going to just share my screen right away, and I've got some slides going. We'll get that going there. Press play there. Oh, great. Okay. And also, I'm going to have the chat open on the side, and so if you have questions at all during this, I'll be able to answer your questions. But anyway, my name is Cassidy. We're going to be talking about Next.js today. If you ever want to reach out to me, I'm at Cassidy on GitHub, on Twitter, on most things. Not on Instagram. A teenager took that from me, sadly. But that's where I am on the internet. I'm a principal developer experience engineer at Netlify, and Netlify is a great place where you can host websites and build things, and it has a bunch of really cool tools. And I'll be touching on Netlify a little bit. It's definitely more about Next.js, but you know, Netlify is cool too. So that being said, I figure I'll jump right in and kind of explain a little bit more about Next.js, and then we'll do some live coding too, so you can see how some aspects of it work. So that being said, why Next.js? Next.js is a React framework. It is something that people don't often realize. React isn't necessarily a framework in itself. React is a library. React is something that kind of enhances your JavaScript as you go and lets you do things with it. You can kind of structure your React apps however you want. But with Next.js, it's a little bit more structured, which has its pros and cons, but there are some great things that are built out of the box that make it nice and easy to export websites that are very full-featured. One of the big reasons why people use Next instead of just plain vanilla React, and I think there's a place for both, but one big problem is SEO, for search engine optimization. When you have everything rendered client-side, you often might have some struggles with getting your websites optimized for search engines, because the browsers, or rather the search engines, have to go to your website and run JavaScript to be able to find out what's happening with your website. And with Next.js, you don't have to do that. And also, just in terms of speed, when everything is run client-side with just, for example, a vanilla React application, it works great. And typically with fast internet and the technologies we have today, there's not too much problem with that. But if you do something that's a bit more server rendered, then things can be loaded a little bit faster for the user rather than having to have all of JavaScript load to get the application going. And so Next.js allows you to both do server rendering and also export your website to a static website as well, while still using React. And so that's a really powerful reason, or a few reasons why people use Next.js. And so In terms of features that you should probably know about when you're going into Next and why people actually use it, there's quite a few really nice things. And the first ones are just for your developer experience, these nice to haves. There are a few things that are pretty great built into Next right away. The first one is hot code reloading. So as you update your code, it automatically updates in the browser, and it's really nice to just have that out of the box. Styling options, there are a ton of styling options that are supported without you having to install anything. You could run CSS modules, you can do styled JSX, you can do CSS and JS options, you could do Sass, you could do less. All this stuff is already built into the framework right away. It also has TypeScript support, and so if you want to have types in your JavaScript, you can do TypeScript right away. And environment variables are built in as well. And so if you want to call an API of some kind or have some kind of key for your database, those environment variables support is built right into Next right away. And so you don't have to run a special node thing on the side in addition to running Next. And also it has automatic code splitting. And if you don't know what that is, long story short, when you export your site, when you run your site, it only runs the code and it only includes the code that you use. And so let's just say I have a component that I wrote, but I don't actually use it in the application or run it anywhere. That code is split out and it results in a smaller application and just a much more efficient application as well. So these are really nice things that come with Next right out the gate. Now, in terms of routing is really nice in Next because it is file system based. There's a folder called Pages, and I'll show that to you when we're live coding a bit. There's a folder called Pages, and for every file in that folder, you have a route automatically set up. And so if you had a contact.js, for example, if you go to your website /contact, that route exists. And as a result, that also means that you can have variable dynamic routing as well. And so you can actually make routes where you don't necessarily know what the routes will be, but you can include variable names for them, which is really nice to have, especially when you are, for example, writing blog posts and you don't want to create a new file every single time you write a blog post. And that also involves API routes as well. And so again, Next does both static and server rendered stuff. You can create API routes for yourself as well. So it's a very full-featured framework. The API for Next, there are some functions and methods that they include that are just, again, nice to haves. And again, it's because it's React based, they're React components pretty much, React components and hooks. And so these are the four main ones. Next link, it allows you to link between pages, and it does client-side navigation. So it's faster than if you would fully reload pages every single time. Next head, it allows you to put stuff in the head of your application. And so if you wanted to have certain meta tags, optimize for SEO, have, I don't know, a different title or different styling or something in the head, you can do that with Next head, and it's just a component in there. The Next router, that is a hook where you can use the router and manipulate it as you will. It's pretty straightforward what that one is. And then AMP, get amped up. You can make AMP pages. And so this one was actually built in collaboration with the Google AMP team, where you can build AMP pages that will load in browsers. And so that's something really useful, especially if you're making some kind of site that's more journalism-y or something. The CLI for Next also is pretty straightforward because there's not a lot to it. With Next build, you can build your site. With Next dev, you run it in development mode. With Next start, it runs it in production mode after building. And then Next export, it exports your site as a static website, and that runs it all for you. And it's really nice. Only a couple more things, then we'll actually get to code. There's also a custom configuration that you can do, and it's a very simple next.config.js file. And it's it's a very simple node module that you can add whatever things that you want in there. So let's just say I wanted to add MDX support into my Next application. I can just add it in this config file, and it acts as kind of just a node webpack module that is plopped in there. And so it's really flexible with pretty much anything in the JavaScript ecosystem that you can just install in there. And then there's a lot of options that you can throw in there. So that being said, this is the end of the actual presentation part of it. I want to actually get into code now. And so I'm going to be pulling up a GitHub repo. If you'd like to write this down, it's my handle Cassidy at GitHub, and then next-netlify-starter. And I'm going to pause and talk a little bit before I actually run this one. So with Next, they do have a create Next app where you can do run create Next app, and it'll give you the very, very bare bones application. I built a nice little starter here, and so I'm going to exit out of here really quickly. Oh, and also I have the chat open now on the side. So if you do have questions, let me know, and I will jump over and answer them as soon as I can. But I made this starter project here so that way it can be automatically deployed and have some stuff configured under the hood already, and I'll walk through it. But it's, again, Cassidy is my handle, and then Next Netlify Starter is the repo. And thank you, Lewis, for answering the question on what is an AMP page. TypeScript is just optional. You don't have to install anything special for it, and you don't have to use it if you don't want to. And if I'm going to tell some React jokes, I don't know how you'll react to them. Anyway, okay, so we have this GitHub repo, this Next Netlify starter. And one thing that I'm very happy about, and this is where my sales pitchy stuff comes into play, but I promise this isn't an ad for Netlify. What I like about Netlify is it makes it really easy to deploy applications. And so I'm going to just run deploy to Netlify. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a new repo for me. And so I'm connecting to my GitHub account. I'm going to run this really quick, and I'm just going to create a new repo based on my starter application. And so what should we call this one? We'll call this one Next Personal Website. How about that? We'll just go with it and see how it goes. Next Rubber Duck. Oh, I like that. Next Beastie. Oh, there's so many options. I kind of like Next Beastie. But then when people come to my profile, they'll be like, what the heck does that mean?
It has to be a Next Beastie.
Okay, we'll do Next Beastie. Next Beastie demo.
Thanks.
Next Beastie demo. Okay, I run save and deploy. Then, as we have a little ... as this is running, this is the part that's probably the riskiest part of the talk. I'm deploying a website live. What that has done now is it's starting to deploy this website that I've made. And so if I were to go to my GitHub account, GitHub Cassidy, now this repo is going to exist here in my profile. So I've got this Next Beastie demo. And again, it's based on my Next starter, and right now it's still actually being run by Netlify, so I'm gonna let that go a little bit while I get that running. But what I'm going to be able to do then is actually completely run my application and develop it and have it deployed in here. And so I can install this Next GitHub app. I'm gonna actually do that really quick. And so, yes, I know, I'm gonna save it, I'm gonna run it. Okay, I probably should have done that before as an employee, but whatever. Anyway, what that allows you to do is now every single time I make a push to my GitHub repo, it'll automatically deploy to Netlify. And so look at that, welcome to my app. We haven't even coded yet and it's done, woohoo. You said, ew, is that the new GitHub? It is, and there's still some little wonky things that need to be fixed in there, but that's fine. Anyway. So we have this demo, and look at that. It looks just like my Next Netlify starter, except it's the Beastie demo now. And again, it is live. This is the URL for it. You can go to this if you want. I'm actually going to change the domain because it could be cuter. I'll just do Beastie demo next. I should do Next Beastie demo to be consistent. Okay, anyway, it is done. And now that is the URL that you can go to, and it automatically changes immediately. That's so fun. It's so easy to deploy. Okay, anyway, that is the end of my sales pitch. Let's actually code a little bit. So I'm gonna clone this repo right here, and we'll get running. So git clone, and then this beastie demo, donezo, and now I'm gonna open it up here in VS Code for us all to see. You can see my very messy file system here. Okay, beautiful, we're here. If my code is too small, let me know. I'm gonna open up package.json. Okay, let me know if the font is too small, otherwise I'm just gonna roll with it. So the first thing I wanted to talk through is this package.json. As you can see, I didn't actually run anything that is particularly fancy. This starter is truly just bare bones, but instantly deployable. And so we have these, oh, I guess I'm in danger. Okay. We have these scripts where it's next dev, next build, next start, next export. Those are just those API scripts that I talked about before. The only dependencies that I have in here are next and react, and that is it. And so it's very, very bare bones. This netlify.toml file, this is what allows me to just instantly deploy it. And that's what allows me to have this deploy to Netlify button right here. What it does is it tells Netlify, hey, whenever something is changed on this site, I want you to run build and then run export. And then that'll create a new static website that is published to a folder called out. And then that folder called out is the thing that is loading this site right here. And so that's how that one works. That's what a netlify.toml is. And then in the README, you saw the README. I can actually just take all of this out and be just like, beastie demo, hurrah. And that's very simple. But this is all the setup. Oh, and I wanted to talk about jsconfig.json. One of the features that I didn't mention in the slides, but it's something that's really good to be aware of, is that it automatically has absolute importing. So for example, let's just say you have a design system, and right now I just have components mapped to this, but let's just say I had a design system where I did like add components, add button, this. Instead of doing that // to your buttons, you can just make paths here that are defined. So that way when you do @ components, it'll always point to the components folder. And especially as you get much larger applications, this is really, really nice. And this is built into Next as well. Okay, so we have our pages. This is our index.js, and our index.js is what is loaded right here. And I'm actually going to run this locally instead of running the live one. So I'm going to do npm start, or actually npm run dev. That's what I want to do. Why? Oh, I'm not in my, oh my gosh. It's very early for me. I'm sorry. Okay, let me cd into my next beastie demo. There we go. Now I'll do npm run dev. Or not. npm start. Oh, do I need to npm install? I do. That's my own fault. Sorry. My bad. Okay. While that's installing, I'll talk through this a little bit. And so I have two components that I've predefined in here, a footer and a header. And we also have this head component here. Yeah, time for coffee. It's done. It's done. So this head component here, this import head from next.head, this is defining what is actually in the head of this application. And so I'm going to now run npm run dev. And instead of doing the prod, I'll do a local copy of it. And it's going to look exactly the same. But you see this next starter right here? I'm going to say beastie demo and then save it. And look at that, hot code reloading. It automatically updates the title in here. And then the favicon is just something that I put in this public folder right here. And so this is automatically updating. This head component just updates everything that could be in the head, which is really useful. And I have some pre-built components that I made that it's truly just an H1 for the header, where we have welcome to my app. And I could be doing welcome to my website. And then, as you can imagine, that updates that. Hey, Edward, welcome. And then we also have this footer, and that's just this made with love for you thing that I made with a Netlify heart logo. But I could be just like copyright Cassidy the Great or something. And then that automatically updates that. So as you can see, these are pretty basic components. And as you can see, it has fast refresh built in. Yes, Pranjal, that's exactly what's happening there. What's cool about fast refresh, and this is something that's new to React as well, it allows you to create applications and automatically update components, and it'll maintain the same state across refreshes. And so let's just say I'll have a new component, and I'm going to make this, it's simple, but it's going to be a counter component. And I'm going to say export default function counter, like this. And so this counter, it's just a function like before, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a div, and this is going to say count is something, and I'm going to use React state. And so I'm going to do import use state from React, and then inside of there, I'll do let count, set count. We'll start it at 0, use state starting at 0. We'll include count in there. Oh, and I'll actually have to also import that component really quick. So we have that. We have a very basic counter that doesn't do anything yet, but the fast refresh in there is going to be really cool. So instead of doing this get started by editing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import our counter from at components./counter like that. And then I'm going to get rid of this paragraph and I'll do counter. And yes, I'm not using TypeScript. I don't feel like it, but sorry about that. Okay, so we have this count is 0 right here. Now, what I can do in this counter is I'll include some buttons that increase the count. I know you want your types. You're not getting your types. I'll do a button that says add. You don't need to import React. No, it's automatically imported. If you want, if for example, I didn't want to do this whole use state thing, I could do react.useState and that would work, but I don't like doing that in my components. So you can do that. But yes, you don't need to import React when you're running a Next app, which cleans up a single line of code, but it's nice to do. And I can do an on click, and inside of this on click, I will set count to count +1, like that. So now I have this add, and it increases the count. Very fun. But if I were to, I don't know, for example, add a BR tag and update it, not only does it make that update, but it maintains the state of that count variable, which is really, really nice. And for something as small as this, that doesn't really matter. But if you think about much more complicated state examples, for example, having to log in a mock user and then see if a certain component runs, that is something that is really useful with fast refresh. And that's something that's nice to do. Someone just privately messaged, I think you still need TypeScript because of the linter and files, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, you don't need to import React or anything. And some people love TypeScript. You know, it is a great language. I am just not a fan of it. Anyway, we have made a component and we have imported it into our page. Let's just say though, we want to be able to, the puns, friends, you are doing great. That reduces how often I'll need to regenerate state. Is fast refresh new to Next 9.4? Yes, or I think it was in Next 9.3.5 or something, or 9.3.2, something like that. It wasn't in the original 9.3. It was in one of the minor versions. But it is something that's relatively new. Anyway, let's create a new page. And so I mentioned having a contact form before. Let me do a contact.js. And then inside this contact.js, I'm actually just going to copy everything in index and then I'll delete stuff. As you can see right here, I'm using styled JSX to just have some very, very basic styles in there. That is not particularly fancy, but I'm going to say Beastie contact instead in here. And then I'm going to say, please contact me. I am lonely. And now that once we've done that, what I can do is I can do /contact like that. And look at that. We have an automatic page. It is just done. Oh, I think that is the coolest thing. I don't know about any of you, but being able to just do that so quickly is really, really exciting. Now, this is where I get kind of sales pitchy again. There's an awesome way to do contact forms where you don't have to implement any backends and stuff. And yes, it's kind of Nexty, but it's also kind of Netlify as well. And I think you'll really appreciate this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new component, and I'm going to call this contact form. Netlify forms. Yes, we're going to create a contact form for Netlify. And so I'm going to do an export default function contact form. And then inside of this contact form, what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a form. And so this form is going to, ooh, this is testing my live coding abilities. We're going to do a form with the name of contact. And then we're also going to have an action. The action on here, it just has to, I can actually make it redirect just to the home page. And then we'll do a method as post, oh my goodness. And then I'll do the next part in just a second. So, and that wasn't a pun, but it should have been the following part in a second. Yeah, I can code a form without copying and pasting. So watch out, world. There's going to be labels. So let's just say I want to gather email addresses as like a guest book. So instead of a contact form, it's more of a guest book, but that's fine. I'm going to have some kind of input type equals email. And then inside that email, I'm gonna do, yeah, you know what, I'm just gonna do that for now. I'm also going to add a label, and then usually you would do a label for and then have an ID here, but because of React, you have to do HTML for. That's just something that you have to do. It's not even Next specific. It's just, that's how it's done. I'll do this label, your email, and then I'll do ID is your email like this, and I'll say email like this. Okay, so we have this very, very basic form in here. Oh, and I want a submit button as well. So I'll do a button, and then the type will be submit. Okay, so are you able to wrap the input within the label for this to work? Yes, you can. I personally, I used to do that a lot more, but I've been told that this is a bit more accessible to do it this way. I admit I am not an expert on accessibility. I just try, which is what most of us can really do. So anyway, you can put it on the inside, but I'll just do it this way. So we have this contact form. If I were to go to my contact page and I wanted to, instead of importing counter, I'll do contact form and contact form. We're also not using this header anymore. Now, if I were to refresh, oh, I still have please contact me, I'm lonely. Okay, I'll put contact form right in here. So we have this form. It doesn't do anything, but with Netlify, they have form functionality built in, and we can actually add a form by just adding a Netlify attribute to our form, which is really, really useful. So what I can do is just add Netlify to my form, and suddenly Netlify will capture our inputs. And there is a next specific thing where normally in regular HTML form, I could just do Netlify. For next, I have to do data-Netlify is equal to true. And that's just because of how it compiles things. But now that I have this done, and it doesn't look like anything particularly fancy. Oops, I accidentally hit Control S here. I just added this data Netlify is true. What I can do is I'm going to stop this and I'll do get status, and I'm just going to do a get add of everything, and then commit -m, add contact form. So once I've pushed this, what's going to happen is this contact form is going to, and this contact page is going to trigger a new build. And so when I refresh this, we'll see that this beastie demo is here. We've got a new build that is running on Netlify, and it's got to actually capture everything, but you can see that it says building right here. And then when it says building, once we finally get this published, we're going to have a working contact form, and it's going to be really, really useful. And oh, I can't wait to show this. I did write a blog post on this kind of subject. Thanks, Edward. I can share the link to that blog post, but I do write a longer blog post that covers this. So if I open this up, we have our counter. It exists, hooray. Now I'm going to go to /contact. And we have this, please contact me, I'm lonely. I'm going to put in an email address, cassidy@cassidoo.co. And I'm gonna hit submit. Oh, I got a 404. I need to fix that. I know what I did wrong. It is fine. Anyway, I have submitted this form, but just because we had that 404 page doesn't mean that it wasn't actually used. And so what happens is I get this contact form right here, and we get verified submissions. And I think because I had that 404, I don't know if my submission actually counted, but Netlify will automatically capture all of the submissions that you get in your form, and it can be exported to a CSV file or a JSON or something. And then you can use that to, for example, create a new mailing list for yourself, or do some kind of D3 data manipulation or validation and everything. And it handles all of your form stuff for you, which is really, really useful. One thing that I built in-house for Netlify relatively recently, netlify.com/donation matching. We did a big donation matching thing for Black Lives Matter and for a bunch of different things. And what we were able to do is we had a form right in here where we had people submit files, had people submit receipts. You can actually have people upload files to these forms, and it was automatically in our Netlify dashboard, and it was able to work. And you can automate all of this, like Bastian just said. You could put that through Zapier, or if this then that, IFTTT. You can put this through a bunch of stuff and really automate what you get with your forms. And I think that's something that's really powerful that you can do really easily in Next, and then kind of enhance with Netlify a little bit, which again, I think that is the coolest thing. Let's actually fix our contact form. Again, it didn't navigate, it for some reason didn't go to the correct page. I'm going to change this to success, and I'll just make a new route for it. So I'll do success.js, and then in there, I'm just gonna copy everything again. And not in there. In our success.js, I'm gonna paste it in here, and I'm going to say form submitted in there, and I'll be just like, hooray, your form was submitted. And then I'm going to link people to the home page. And so I'm going to import link from next/link, and we'll use that link API. And so it's very similar to React Router, except it does something a little bit funky where you create a link component, then you put an anchor tag inside of there and say, go back home like this. And then you put your href up here like that. And so if I were to go in here on my local and do success, oh, I'm not running it. Huh. That'll do it. If I actually run the application and then go to that route, then hooray, my form was submitted. Now I can go back home. And it was very fast, but you might have noticed that was actually a client-side routing thing that just happened. It navigated to the home page without doing a full page refresh. When you use link, the A tag doesn't have href itself. So it actually is, you said, which is bad for SEO. This is actually something that Next has optimized. You put the href here, and then when it compiles, it does it properly. The link just does this for that client-side routing part, but when it's actually compiled into the website itself, it does show a proper href and everything. And so don't worry about that. Because Next exports things as static stuff, here, actually, let me load that live, and then we can inspect element in there. So I'm going to add the success page right in there. And I'm also, did I save this? Yes. I'm going to do git add components and contact form, add success page. There we go. And let me push it. So while that's building, what we can do is once that's actually loaded onto the page, it will allow us to inspect it, and you can see that actually it is decent for SEO because of how it is exported to the browser. And that is really a really cool part about Next Export. And there's actually a tool, and I'm forgetting the name of it now. I can pull it up after doing a quick Google, but there's actually a metric in Next that says how static is your website. And there is a really interesting thing, because you can do with Next server-side rendering, and that's something that you can't necessarily do statically. And so there is a metric where as you write code, it'll say, yeah, you can still export this statically. Yes, we can still handle this. But there comes a point where you start doing a lot of things that are very node powered. And that's when you start to think, oh, dang, I don't know if this is something that I can statically run. And that's where you might run into some hiccups, because you're just like, I still want to use Netlify, but Netlify, it doesn't necessarily run backend powered websites. And that is where something very cool comes into play, which is Netlify functions. Netlify functions allows you to run basically AWS Lambda without having to deal with AWS Lambda under the hood. And there's this really great package that I use a lot called Next on Netlify. And with Next on Netlify, what it does is it allows you to create a utility that makes you do node applications with Next and run it on Netlify anyway via Netlify functions. And it has a really simple setup where you add this to your Next config, and you add this post build to your package.json, and then you change up your netlify.toml file, which is that thing that Netlify reads again. When you do that, that allows you to run both static websites and server-side rendered websites on Netlify still using Next, and it works really, really well. With the export, but not with the build and start, right? It still works with the build and start, and that's what I'm talking about with the Next on Netlify. When you export it, it shows all your files that are statically built and the others. Yes, and so actually, I think we're published now. Let's try to run this. So we have this contact. I'm gonna do my email again and submit it. And why is that a 404? Oh, look at that. My form was submitted. I don't know what just happened. Maybe that was a caching issue. Okay, cool. But I'm going to inspect this really quick. And then when you look at it, if you notice, it actually does render this as an href is a slash right here. And so you don't have to worry about that SEO concern that you mentioned. It renders it as that. When you export, it shows all your files that are statically built and the others. Yes, and here's another example. I don't want to get into a whole node-based application now with Next because we don't have time, but I built one already, and so let's look at it. I have this thing called Sonnet 18, I call it, and what it is it compares GitHub repos. And so, for example, I'll compare my own repos, unless any of you have a repo you want to share, and I'll compare this repo, which is my Vim config, and then I'll also compare, actually, I'll compare this repo that we've just been building, this Beastie demo. And I'll compare that. Oh, we got one in here. I will get yours, Adrian. Okay. And then I'm going to put that in there. Then I run compare. Now, what? Oh no, this is a very, very bad bug. That should not have happened. At least it's doing my styling, so that means that it's a bug that I caused. That is a shame. What if I took out one of them? Maybe it's because there's multiple. I genuinely do. Oh, look at that. Okay, I'm gonna just blame you, Adrienne, and I'm sorry. Okay, anyway, that shouldn't have happened. So there's GitHub, this just does a very quick GitHub repo comparison, and this is using that Next on Netlify, and this is running on an AWS Lambda thing built into Netlify here. I have a link, and this is using that link tag, and as you can see, it loads that href thing that I was telling you about. And so it is working with that, with that, what's it called? Href stuff. It'll be fine. Sorry, English is hard. And I did a podcast 3 hours ago at 6:45 a.m. and I'm still like doing things. Sorry about that. Anyway, is the contact form failing because it's trying a post rather than a get? I don't think so. That shouldn't be why it's failing. I'm not sure. Well, anyway, it should have worked. Let's look at forms and find out if it loaded our contact stuff. The weird thing is that maybe it thinks I'm spam. No, I'm not entirely sure why that's not working, because it's worked on every other demo, so I'm just gonna call this a demo effect. I know why it's not working. Oh, I just had an inspiration. Okay, there's this thing that you have to add called a form name in a Netlify form, and I'm sorry that I just remembered it. Okay, I have to do an input of type equals hidden. This is why you've got to have documentation up or something when you're doing a live demo. You have to have an input that has your form name inside of there. And so I'll do name equals and literally just form name, and then I'll have value is contact. I'm really sorry about that. I was just so excited. Okay, this will make our form work. And this was totally my fault. I should have remembered to do that. Okay, oh, yay. Okay, also, because I'm tired of navigating between things, I'm going to add a link on our homepage. And it's just going to be a link back. So I'll just copy it from here. Go back home, except I'm going to do that. Oh no, don't freak out on me, please. And I'm gonna import link from next/link, and then we're already on the home page. I think Prettier's yelling at me for some reason. I'm not sure why. And I'm going to go to the contact form. Give me your email or else contact. There we go. Thank you, Jean. Yes, it was contact, not connect. Okay, cool. So that should run it. Connect barbarian. You guys are pretty funny. Okay, now I'm going to add things, and things should actually work. Wow, I'm so happy that I figured that out, because that was going to drive me nuts. Commit, add working form input. Cool. Now we'll let that build live, and we'll actually get stuff. One thing that's actually something that's actually pretty cool about these forms as well. I kind of geek out about forms because I don't like having to set up backends for forms, and so this is probably my favorite Netlify feature. But what is great about it is it also handles spam submissions, which I mentioned before. There's verified and spam. You can actually add a thing called a honeypot, and it's truly just another input called Netlify honeypot that you can plop in there. And if it captures a bot submission, the bots will fill out the honeypot, but humans won't, because it's hidden to humans. And then, yeah, it basically captures all your spam, and you can see where spam is coming from, which is pretty nice. But anyway, let's actually get it working for real. Okay, working form input. Oh, please, I beg of you. Okay, give me your email. Giving email, submitting. Oh, yes, yes. Take that, Lewis. You can't do that and take bets that it's not working. Okay, great. So now that we have an actual working form, hooray. Oh, I'm so excited. Look at that. We have a verified submission. I don't know why it's blank. I'm going to assume that's a Netlify bug, but hey, we got an email, and it's a verified submission, and it works. I bet if I exported that as a CSV, it'll actually show the email, but I'm just going to say, look, last submission at 9:50. Oh, doesn't that make you happy? It makes me really happy that it actually worked on a live demo, because that never happens. But anyway, there are some really cool features built into Next. Again, we've been using the head, we've been using the link. I didn't set up an AMP page because I didn't feel like it, but we can export our app as a static application. We can run it as a Node application with a bunch of Lambdas built in if we want. We can actually include our own API routes by just running it in this API folder. I have a very, very basic just hello.js if you wanted to run that and see how that one works. But as you can see, it's really nice to have a kind of basic React app structure that allows you to be very flexible and code how you want and export it really, really nice and easily. And I want to leave a bit more time for questions in case there are any, but this is pretty much what I wanted to cover today, to show you a little bit more about routing, a little bit more about the API, and some of the cool things that you can do without having to actually need a backend. So are there any final questions before we close out for the day? Do we use it at Netlify? Yes, I actually am in charge, quote unquote, of using Next at Netlify. And we're realizing that a lot of our customers use Next but don't fully understand how to use Next, and they end up getting frustrated and switching over to Gatsby, which Gatsby is a really nice alternative, and it really depends on what you like. So I'm actually in charge of producing more content and building out more Next resources on Netlify as well. What does my GitHub boilerplate do actually? That is a good question, and it's very, very simple. So I'll pull it up and I'll show you. So when you create a very, very basic Next site just with create Next app, no, not the Great Gatsby, ha ha ha. Well, kind of. Anyway, when you create a very basic Next app, it gives you most of these things. But what my starter does is it adds this jsconfig.json with these absolute imports in here. And so you can add them as you go. And that's something that is useful, and you can delete it if you want. So that's what my starter includes. It also includes this netlify.toml that allows you to automatically deploy to Netlify. And if you don't want to automatically deploy to Netlify, you can delete it. And then I also add this components folder with these sample components, which that isn't included in a basic Next app. And I think I added a couple more things to the git ignore, and I added this like one-click deploy. Otherwise, it's pretty much all exactly what's in Create Next App. It just adds a few small things to make it a little bit nicer to get up and running. Oh, and it also allows you to do a little bit more with the public stuff. I basically cleaned out a lot of the bloat that came with the Create Next App, because if you do start a basic Next app, it has a bunch more components and cards and things, and it's just like, oh, view the documentation, do this, do that, and it has a lot of extra components that you don't need. This takes out the extra components and just has the very bare bones in there. Is there a limit on serverless function duration for Netlify functions? I don't think so. I'm not sure, but I think people haven't really load tested, or rather, I haven't load tested it very much, but we have some pretty large customers that really go ham with the Netlify function. So I don't think there's any particularly big limit that I'm aware of, but yeah, you should be fine. Why should I not use NextJS? That is a good question, because it really varies. For myself, when I want to create a very, very fast demo, I tend to use vanilla React instead of NextJS, because I personally am a React person and try to go as vanilla as possible when I can. And so that is typically when I'm doing a very fast demo, I tend to use that. Also, there's a thing called escape hatching, where let's just say you want to, if I'm building a React app and I want to exit out of React and run jQuery or something, for example, and I just want to run that for a little bit and then come back into React world in some other component. It is very hard to do that with Next. That's something I've actually struggled with, and I've talked with the Next team, and they say, oh, that is not as supported. If you want to be able to leave Next land while still living in the same project and then come back into Next land to run whatever other kinds of code you want in there. That's something that you can't do as easily in Next. I do think it has to be possible because it doesn't make sense. But like, for example, because of how Next structures things, you can't actually do like a document.get element by ID root or whatever and have multiple React apps in a row, kind of like you can do with vanilla React. And so that's one of the complaints I've had when I've tried to do some funky projects with Next before. So that's one of the reasons why you might not want to use Next.js if you have plans for escape hatching and that sort of thing. How is billing handled when using AWS serverless functions through Netlify? If I'm being honest, I don't pay attention to the billing stuff as much because I've never used it so much that I've gotten past the free tier. You can do a lot on the free tier with Netlify, and I will say this: there are some things coming that will make certain things much less expensive if you do end up using beyond your free tier limits, and I can't say more than that. But I've never gone beyond the free tier as a user of Netlify. For me, Next is not as mature as Nuxt, for example. Yeah, there are certain things on Next that are still very young. That's been something that I've been surprised to see. For example, one of the things that kind of blew my mind is you can't have query strings on static sites with Next. Like if I did this question mark and then query equals fish or whatever, you can't do that unless you use the server-side rendered stuff, which doesn't make sense to me because I feel like that's something that's very basic for all kinds of sites, and that's something that, for example, Gatsby does really easily. So there are some things that are still very new with Next, and there's some maturity that has to be done there for sure. Rewriting the URL config router override is still experimental. Yeah, there's quite a few things that are still experimental with Next, like the fast refresh is still experimental. There's also a thing called and it's a long name, incremental static regeneration, that is in beta right now with Next. And I showed you that Sonnet 18, which, by the way, if you don't know what Sonnet 18 is, that's the Shakespeare thing where they say, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And so that's why I do, shall I compare thine repo to a summer's day? But anyway, this one, when I did it before, which, oh no, let me copy some things again. This one, and then I'll do my Vim up one. Again, you'll notice that I do a query string. What? Why is it 505? Oh, well, weird. Okay, anyway. You'll notice that I do a query string here where it does repos equals whatever. Adrian, aha! Then it's fine. Anyway, it has this query string right here. That's because I do the, you know what I'm talking about, the AWS Lambda stuff there, or rather Netlify function stuff. But there's a different version of this that I made called Sonnet 18 incremental, where it does the exact same thing. Actually, this is going to be silly, but I'm going to copy and paste this so that way I don't have to type it out again. I call it Sonnet 18 incremental, which it does the exact same thing, but under the hood it looks different because look at the URL once I do this. Hey, no 505s there. It does, instead of a query string, it does a slash. And so it says slash Cassidy NextBC demo and then slash Cassidy Vim up right there. So this is their incremental static regeneration, quote unquote. What they do with this is they allow you to create really funky long URLs. And then based on those URLs, you can create a dynamic route that changes the content of the page based on the URL, and it renders that as a static page. So it's funky because it's a server-side route, but it renders it statically. And it's funky, and it's something that I'm still kind of wrapping my mind around it. Adrian, I see you with your stuffed animal there. Anyway, it's a funky way of putting things together, and it breaks your brain, right? Because it is both static and both server-side rendered, and it's also in beta. So I actually found some bugs in Next when I was first using this and had to talk to the Next team about it. That's something that I think has a lot of cool potential, but it's still very new. And so it's something to keep an eye on. Both static and dynamic is the most JS thing I've ever heard of. I know it's weird, but it's a capability of Next that's new, and I'll be curious to see where they take it and see if that impacts other frameworks in any way. I think we are at time. Are there any last questions before we sign off?
Yeah, last question. Hello, I'm back.
Hello. Well, if not, I want to say thank you so much. This was a really fun time. Even though there were some bugs, we figured them out together.
Yeah,
And I had a really good time chatting with all of you.
yeah, well, thank you everyone, and I really wanted to thank you very much, you Cassidy, because I remember when I reached out to you, I think it took you only a couple of seconds to accept, and I don't think you knew much about us, and you ended up today with a terrific talk. I think everybody enjoyed. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time. Can you do the same thing with Nuxt and Netlify? Yes, you can, Florian. I am not a Nuxt expert, but two of my teammates are, and they have written lots of blog posts on the Netlify blog if you'd like to do that. But thank you all so much. Yes, time to go play Civ 6. That'll be a great break after this. But thank you all so much again for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye, everyone.